Yep, go for it.
All right, I think it'll take a minute or so for everybody to join us. Sorry, we're a couple minutes delayed. We are still working out our new platform and making sure that everything is working okay. So we'll just wait another minute or so to allow people to join this session, and we'll start at about 7:05. So just sit tight for a minute. Feel free as you're starting tonight to maybe put something in the chat about what you're looking for, maybe specifically your biggest resume headache, your biggest resume challenge. I will tell you that when I was first re-entering the workforce, my biggest resume challenge was trying to figure out how to frame my religious service, a lot of the real professional skills that I learned in different settings, but in a religious setting, in a professional way. And so that was my biggest resume headache at the time. All right, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. Everybody, welcome tonight to our Better Way Thursday workshop. We are so excited about tonight's topic. We're just getting started again this fall with these sessions, but one of the most common questions that we get with all our tech moms, but actually any woman who's had a career break, anybody who's looking to pivot and really move into a new area, young college students are facing a lot of these issues is, how do I fill out a resume when I'm not exactly sure what to put on it, or I'm moving to a new area and I don't know how to build a resume that's appropriate for where I'm going moving forward. So we are so thrilled tonight to have Angela Ashurst McGee here. She is the founder and president, is that your title, president? Red Rocket Resume, which is a wonderful organization that helps people create better resumes and be much more successful in their job search. So Angela, I hate reading long bios. I'd much rather have you introduce yourself, but I'll invite people to connect with you on LinkedIn. They can learn about your accomplishments there, because I know that sometimes we don't love to toot our own horns, and I know that you have many, many accomplishments, but so we'll let people read all about your amazingness on LinkedIn, but I'd love you to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and then just dive right into your workshop tonight.
Okay, will do. Well, I'm so excited to be here with you, and I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for everything relating to re-entry, career transitions. I definitely have a non-traditional career path myself, where in college I was just a total idealist and literature lover and spent like 0 seconds thinking about pragmatism or careers or anything else like that, which, you know, I got a good education, so that's great, but sort of became an accidental business owner as my kind of freelance jobs that I was doing while raising 6 children, basically during nap time, sort of developed into a business. And several of the writers that I currently have now on my team also are sort of re-entry mothers or had one career path and are now doing something kind of different. So we definitely have a soft spot in our hearts. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. We are going to talk kind of big picture. We're going to do some mindset stuff, and then we're going to get down into the nitty gritty. And I want to give you a toolkit for how to put your resume together. And before we start, I want to give you this little warning. Even in the best of circumstances, resumes and career development really trigger sometimes our anxieties and fears about, am I good enough? Am I going to be successful? Everybody else is better than me, all of our imposter syndrome. And when you're coming at it from a non-traditional background or re-entering the workforce or making a career pivot, those can even be more magnified. And so those feelings of fear and resistance can lead to resistance, which is the feeling that we have that stops us from doing the things we know we should do and that we really want to do. So my challenge for you in this next hour is to just notice the moments when that resistance is popping up for you. So you can just kind of be aware of where it likes to pop up, and you can just say, thank you, and step aside while I do my awesome stuff. This is a little background about Red Rocket Resume. And the thing that I love about it the most is turning that fear and anxiety into clarity and confidence. You may have various possibly stumbling blocks or just kind of unusual things about your career path. Those are manageable. Job searching is manageable. Career development is manageable. And the reason why is that you have things to offer. And I love getting a client's awesomeness and putting it on a piece of paper so it's documented and they can see it and take it out into the world. That's what I love the most about my job. So let's dig into kind of the resume mindset that's going to help you know what goes on and what does not go on your resume and how to structure it. And that is the magic yardstick. This is what you use to measure everything against to determine how valuable it is and if it goes onto your resume. And the magic yardstick is that your resume is not about you. What I mean by that is that your resume is about the target company. And it seems kind of silly, but it is such an important mental shift to make. So when you sit down to plan your career or brainstorm the content for your resume, you have to think through a number of these questions. What kind of job you're looking for, where you want your career to go, even things down to your commute and if it's remote or not, and the pay. And also you have to think through a bunch of your own sort of fears and hopes in regards to your job. If I don't get this job, I'll never make enough money. I'll never have the career I want. I will be stuck. You need to think through all of those things, and those are all really valid. But then in order to put together your resume, you need to pivot to thinking about it from the company's perspective. So not just the job you're looking for, but what the company needs in this role. Why are they hiring someone to do this? Why are they paying money for someone to do this? What are they trying to accomplish? Not just where you want your career to go, but what the company's goals and objectives and future plans are. They're trying to accomplish some things, growing, expanding, etc. And also the company's fear and areas of risk. Hiring the wrong person is really risky. They can end up losing money, losing clients, having drama and poor culture fit, having to rehire. So it's really important to have the company's point of view also in your mind as you're starting to put together your resume. So with this magic yardstick firmly in hand, you need to connect in your resume what you do or what you can do with the company's bottom line business goals. And it's going to be something along the lines of making money, saving money, getting new clients, making clients happy, keeping customers, introducing new systems, making things more efficient, making things cost less money, streamlining systems, introducing new products, whatever it might be. And no matter what your job is, from your very first job in the drive-through at McDonald's until corner office, C-suite, your job connects to one of these business outcomes. And you need to think through what is the business outcome that is really behind this task that I am doing. And once you've figured that out, your job is then to communicate that every time you're talking about yourself in a professional setting, on your LinkedIn profile, when you're interviewing, when you're networking, and definitely in your resume. So let's talk about resumes. The purpose of a resume is to get you the interview. This is a super oversimplification, but in the hiring funnel, your resume is going to progress through a number of different audiences. The first audience might be a software screener, an applicant tracking system, which is just a piece of software that HR uses to keep track of their open job requisitions and their applicant pool. And then once it advances through there, it's going to go through a series of human readers, the HR team, maybe the hiring manager, your future colleagues. Then that lands you the interview. And at the interview, you seal the deal, you wow them with your amazingness, and you get the job offer. So the resume gets you the interview, and it does that by showing how you can meet the goals and needs and desires of the employer. And the information on your resume, the experience, the education, the soft skills, those are all just there as evidence for this claim or this promise that you can offer the employer what you're looking for. So let's look at kind of the main components of a traditional resume. I'm going to tell you what kind of a traditional resume looks like, and then we're going to figure out how you might tweak that depending on your situation. And I know I get kind of excited and just start dumping information on you. Robin is monitoring the chats. If you have questions, stick them in the chat and Robin can interrupt and let me know. Or if I get talking fast enough, we'll have time at the end and we can answer some questions too. Okay, here is sort of a traditional resume, somebody that's had full-time jobs for the last 15 years. And basically it's in 3 parts. The first part is the summary section, which is maybe the first quarter of the first page. This is like a movie trailer. It's a summary. It's the high points. If you read nothing else about this person and just read that summary section, you have a pretty good idea of who they are, what they do, what they have to offer. Then the second part is the professional experience. That's where you see those bullet points. It's in reverse chronological order. Current job first, oldest jobs at the end. And then at the very end, the education section, which in this case is super brief, just 1 line. Here's another pretty traditional looking resume. Even if you have a non-traditional background, you want to use this traditional format with some variations. The reason is that this traditional format is a service to the hiring manager. It is a kind of shorthand. They know exactly where to look on the page to find the piece of information that they're looking for. So you will see on Etsy or wherever these really gorgeous graphical resume templates that you can download. And I would encourage you not to do that because think about that magic yardstick. This is not about beautiful document design. This is a working document that is explaining how you can meet the needs of an employer. And the fancy stuff is really just a distraction and makes it harder for the reader of your resume to see the information that they need to see. So you are going to take this traditional format and you're going to make some tweaks. One of the tweaks that you might make is that you might go beyond the typical professional experience and you might include some extra information, some volunteer experience, your technical skills, courses and trainings that you've done, even some life experience. Robin mentioned that she had a lot of really relevant experience that fit in the magic yardstick, but it came from church service and church leadership. If it fits the magic yardstick, then it goes on the resume, even if it's not a normal 9-to-5 full-time job. Same thing with volunteer work at school or community organizations. The other thing that might be different about your resume is that you are going to take the most important, the most relevant information and float that up to the top. So the most important stuff comes first. Sort of like the journalistic triangle. And so in some cases, that might be education rather than having education at the bottom. So here is a resume. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of examples today. And don't get stressed out about sort of capturing the details on any one of them. This is just all adding to your toolkit, giving you lots of ideas so you know how to figure out how to organize your unique experience on your resume. So this one is someone who is in college and their only work experience is a couple years of retail and an internship. So we still have the summary section, but then in the number 2 spot, we put the education and credentials. And we put that up because as somebody who's in college, this is the most relevant, more relevant than this. And we added some extra detail. We included a list of key coursework. So this is just a way of expanding on that relevant education. And then at the end, we included a little service section, some missionary leadership and some church volunteer work. Here's another example of somebody who is a new graduate. Their one and only job is a summer internship. So the education section is longer. When we sort of brainstormed this person's experience, a lot of her education fit the magic yardstick, proving that she is qualified for the job that she is looking for. We have a volunteer leadership section, and we even have a personal section. She traveled to, like 20 countries. So that's some real life experience and competence that can set you apart. So we included that in the resume. So a traditional resume is usually 2 pages long. A reentry or a transition resume can be 1 page. A traditional resume usually has education at the bottom and it's really brief. A reentry or transition resume is in order of priority or influence. And so it may also include coursework, volunteer work, online classes, more details. A traditional resume, usually the oldest job, is one that happened after college graduation. It starts with the first relevant job, and it usually only goes back 10, maybe 15 years. On a reentry or transition resume, you might include some experience that's much older than that because it's relevant, but it happened 15 years ago. Or you might even go ahead and include some work experience that's not exactly on target with your current career goals, maybe retail or whatever it might be, just to sort of establish a little more length in your work history. So you're just going to use that magic yardstick. Robin, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I've got a question from the chat here. One of our tech moms said that she always uses the Indeed resume. That's what she sends in other places. And she said it has extra information in there from the little quizzes and things that they do. Could you talk a little bit about that, the pros and cons about using resumes that come through kind of these forms and other places where we might be creating them?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really good starting point. I would start there to start brainstorming what all might be included. And then I would go back, get out the magic yardstick and take another look at it and see if you like the results. So I wouldn't be bound by it, but that's a great starting point. Yeah, that's really smart. Let me scoot you back over. Okay, let me show you some examples and start adding to your toolbox. This is someone who was applying to a surgical tech program. We included employment experience, but if you look closely, some of this is piano teacher. Experience is experience, and it doesn't matter if it's not in a typical corporation. And we also included this whole section on medical management. This is describing her years caring for her medically fragile child. It's relevant according to the magic yardstick because of where she's applying. If she was applying for, a tech project manager, it would not be relevant. We would leave that off. But it doesn't have to be through a full-time job to be relevant for your resume. Here is another one, somebody applying for an educational assistant after many years at home. So we did start with work experience here, but you'll see it's pretty old, but it's relevant. She was a teacher's assistant at a Montessori school. That's totally on target, totally valuable. So even though it's older, we included it here. And then we created this nice big section showing her education credentials that just come from having been a mom volunteering at her kids' class. So we have kindergarten classroom assistant. That's classroom experience. It fits the magic yardstick. It's totally relevant. We covered it pretty briefly. We didn't do a lot of detail on each one, but this gives you, in my opinion, a pretty good sense that she's got a lot to offer as an educational assistant. Here is someone who did have a traditional career, and you see that over here on page 2, but he was wanting to make a pivot to athletics and event coordination. So using that magic yardstick, all of this great information on inventory and warehouse management isn't the most relevant anymore. So that got bumped down to page 2 so that we could bring forward this big section about sort of his side gigs, being an assistant coach, a recreation instructor, and a soccer referee. So the magic yardstick determined what went in the resume, how much detail we provided for those things. If he was applying for another inventory purchaser job, this probably wouldn't be on the resume at all, or maybe it would be 1 or 2 lines at the very end. So what goes on, how much detail you provide, and what order you put it in.
So I wanted to ask another question about this.
Yeah.
This is really fascinating because you kind of have 2 reverse chronology sections going here, right?
Right.
Some of the things you have in the later section are actually newer than some of the earlier. So you've got, that was really interesting, and I didn't know that that was something that was kind of okay to do. So
Right, yeah. So they're sort of divided up by topic. Instead of having everything kind of interfiled together, we separated this professional experience with the sports leadership. And I think we did that here too. We did work experience. This is stuff where she was like actually employed. And then we did additional experience, all the various stuff where she wasn't employed. And actually, I wanted to point out this one. We made a section called IEP. And if you have had children in special education, you know that this is, you know, high level management skills. So we included that on the resume. Yeah, great question.
So I've got another question that's related to this. When you're talking about the volunteer experience, the other types of experience where the skills and activities gained and performed are very, very relevant to what you're doing, but maybe the job title isn't. So what if you were, for instance, an art teacher, but you actually ran data for all the art students or something like that? So you were doing a data analytics within underneath a job title that doesn't show the relevance. So how can you really emphasize the importance of the skills and things when the job title itself doesn't really lend itself, it doesn't stand out as being relevant? And then later I want you to talk about job titles and how much we can fudge them.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
I wonder about.
Yes. I want to come back to that one in a few minutes because I have an example a couple slides down that is perfect for this. You are going to love it. So if I don't get there, come back and remind me again. But I think we're going to be there in just a few minutes. Did we talk about this one? Yes. Okay. I want to take a couple extra minutes about the 2 most important components of your resume. And we're actually making really, really good time. So start thinking of some more kind of specific questions because I think we'll have time to get into some of those. And these are the 2 parts of your resume that if you can nail this, it's going to just put your resume way at the head of the pack. So the first one is that summary section that I've mentioned a couple times. And this, Robin, is part of the way you can do what you were just describing, which is to make sure that your resume is reflecting forward. Your resume isn't just about what you've done in the past. It's about how you're prepared to do the next thing in the future. And so your summary section is describing you in those terms, not necessarily based on your job title or your past experiences, but what you are prepared to do in the future. So this summary section can look like a few different things. It can be the little example you see here has a headline, has a couple tag words underneath it, has a little paragraph, has some bullets, has some more keywords. It can take whatever structure works for you. And I wanted to include this one as I was going through samples. This is from my son when he was a high school student a number of years ago, and his summary section is 2 lines long. It can be super, super simple. We called him an honor roll high school senior with a strong work ethic because that's all we could say about him at that point in time. Here's one that really focuses on the soft skills: organized, trustworthy, social skills, planning, time management. Those are valid. So go ahead and include those. And again, if you're thinking about that magic yardstick, companies want to hire people who are problem solvers, know how to get things done, are personable, know how to communicate. So those are a great starting point for your summary section. I think this is the one I was thinking of. See down here in the professional experience, she was an art integration coach at a middle school. But what she's applying for are learning experience designer roles. And so up here in the summary section, we're highlighting that she can tailor instruction for specific customer needs. Now, when we say customer, in the past, it's been students, but that's okay. We're not being dishonest about that. She's tailoring instruction, whether you call them users or students or customers. We're using the verbiage of the job that she's applying for and describing her past experience in terms of the target job. Explaining complex technical topics to learners of all ages. That's a way of describing what she was doing at the middle school in terms that are relevant to a training specialist and corporate product expert. So let's look at this job title, Art Integration Coach, Studio and Digital Arts Teacher. If they were to call the school, this is what they would say the title was. But I'm a big fan of the slash. If your job title is one thing that's just not really an accurate descriptor, and you want to say what I really was an instructional designer, I would add that instructional designer slash whatever your official title was. So you have kind of a more descriptive title and then the one that's on the HR paperwork. Does that kind of answer that question, Robin?
I love that. And that's such a fabulous way, because I think there's always this fear, like, well, what if they call and say that wasn't your really job title, you're being dishonest or whatever. So I love that you put both on, because I've certainly had jobs where my job title did not reflect what my job actually should have been, right? Mm-hmm. What my job title actually should have been. So I think that's a really powerful way to do that. We had another question come up in the chat from someone who has had a long period of time. She's had a big career gap, and she wondered if she has to put dates on everything, or can she just give information without putting on dates?
The rule of thumb is that things that are more than 10 years old, you can leave off the dates. And I frequently do that on kind of more traditional resumes. My concern is if somebody picks up a resume and sees a lot of information without dates, it's sort of undermining your credibility. So I would rather show that it's old, but that it was real, rather than making them think, I'm not so sure, this is kind of weird. She's got all this experience, but no dates on any of it. So if they're seeing like a chronology, and then we get to the end and there's a couple things at the end with no dates, that's different than if kind of the whole chronology does not have dates. And we're going to see a few other ways of handling that also. I think in the examples I've shown you, you've seen that you can take that gap in your resume and you can fill it with various things. Volunteer work. Lots of times it works really well to kind of have a consulting business or a freelancing business. You know, maybe you're helping friends and family members, or you have a friend that had a business and you did some stuff for their business, things like that. You can kind of just create a freelance umbrella and list a bunch of projects under there and fill the gap that way. You can also just own the gap and have a line on the resume that says something like, you know, stepped away from my career for X years for family reasons. And I have an example that's going to show that in a couple of minutes also. But what I find is that most people can largely fill that gap. And I'm interested what you think, Robin. I feel like one of the sort of slim silver linings of COVID is that we are starting to be a little bit more open about the fact that employees typically live in families and people are caretakers. And it's not something that you have to hide. It's not unprofessional. It's just humans. Do you think that's true?
I agree at 100% as I'm talking to recruiters and hiring managers and companies all over the place. There absolutely is that understanding. I was recently interacting with a Facebook post where someone was worried about having a gap of like a year over this past year. Mm-hmm. And I made a comment, and it wasn't very professional, but I said, forgive my blunt comment right here, that anybody who asks you about a resume gap over the last year and a half is a jerk. Like, without a doubt, that person's a jerk. And I think that we'll still, you know, we might face that here and then. And is that a company we really want to work for? You know, like that,
well, that's a good question. Yeah. If you're feeling like, you know, there's professionalism. We do want to be professional. You don't want to, you know, be having a video interview with children screaming all around you and in the laundry room. But also, I do think that it is well past time to sort of overcome this bias that having families somehow makes you not professional. So I think COVID is helping us a little bit with that.
And just as more and more women and men are taking different career pathways, it is normalizing the gap a lot more. The work that we're doing, the work that you're doing, there are a lot of organizations. So I think we don't have to fear the gap the way that a lot of people have felt like had to in the past. There will certainly be people who will see it as a negative, but I think those people are becoming fewer and farther between. And I love what you said about the fact that we can fill that gap with so many things. There are very few people, barring, a very serious illness where you were literally in your bed for 2 years or other things like that. Like all of us that have taken career gaps, we were doing a lot of things and things in all different areas that we can say, this is what I learned. These were the skills I was gaining. These were the things I was doing. So I love that idea of filling up the gap in that chronological timeline with different valuable things that we were doing.
Yeah, I really agree. I also think, we do carry sometimes some anxiety and fear of how that's going to be interpreted. So one thing that you can do is prepare in advance a really brief and emotionally neutral description of what you were doing in any gap. So you can just rattle it off. Oh, during that time, I was taking care of my aging parents and I stepped away from my career for 2 years or whatever it might be. If you can just rattle it off with your own sort of very neutral affect, that helps underscore this idea that it's completely professional. It's nothing to be embarrassed of. If you bring some emotion, anxiety to it, then that does raise some red flags. What was really going on there? So just kind of prepare in advance and be able to rattle something off quickly. Okay, we talked about the summary section. A lot of people skip that summary section, and it's a real lost opportunity. This is where you frame your experience in the way that you want it to be interpreted. So don't skip that summary section. And you've seen here lots of ways of organizing it. So just start kind of listing the relevant information and see how it shapes up for you. Does it look like a paragraph and then some bullets? Does it look like a paragraph and then some keywords? Whatever works the best for you. All right, the second super important characteristic of a strong resume, another thing that's really going to set you apart, is taking your resume's bullet points and turning them from responsibilities into accomplishments. So again, when you sit down to brainstorm the content for your resume, you're going to start with sort of a laundry list form. I was responsible for customer service. I did this. I was in charge of this. That's a great starting point. Then you get out that magic yardstick. You think about, what is the business outcome? Why did they hire me to do customer service or to do sales or whatever it might be? And then you're going to structure your bullet in terms of those business outcomes. So not that I was responsible for customer service, but that I improved customer retention. Retention is the business outcome for why they pay someone to do customer service. Not just that I did sales, but that I met my sales quota 10 times in my first year. Not just that I managed the budget, but that I reduced the budget. So taking that responsibility, figuring out the why, the business outcome, and putting that at the beginning of the bullet point. You are going to do this by using specific and concrete details. If there is any way to put a number on it, put a number on it. Even if it's not a super exact or even a super impressive number, something about numbers on the page just give you all of this credibility. So number of students in the class, number of phone calls that you made, anywhere you can put a number on it. And you are going to identify the end results or the benefits of whatever task you were doing. Here are some examples. This is a great sample resume for you to look at, because what do you see right here? Certificate of completion, Rise Next Tech Moms. Up here at the top, because that's so relevant and important. But then I wanted to zoom in on these bullet points down here. This first bullet point, she's basically saying she did tech support, but she pulled out that magic yardstick and began with build credibility and trust. That's why we're doing the tech support. That's what you start your bullet point with, and it gives it so much credibility. Same thing down here. This is another bullet point basically describing tech support, but she says, earned recognition for accuracy and efficiency resolving end users' issues. What company does not want accuracy and efficiency regarding end users' issues? Everybody does. So one of the things that accomplishments does in your bullet points is makes your resume more broadly applicable. If you are making a career pivot, if your bullet points are about meeting user needs, improving efficiency, all of those kinds of end results, then it doesn't matter exactly what you were doing at this job. The other company also wants to hire you because they want those same things. And then this is one that I wanted to highlight. This is somebody working for the post office, but we underscored those carryover skills that are relevant to many jobs: dependability, punctuality, accuracy, productivity. So pivoting, this was my task, into this is what I delivered. This is how I helped the company. This is the value that I brought. Let's see, and here's another one that highlights tech moms. And then look at these bullet points. Number one employee in the department. Well, at this point, I don't care what you were doing in that department. If you were the number one employee, I'm interested in talking to you. Here we have a number: solved 50 to 100 technical issues daily. Okay, apparently we actually don't know how many, because we're saying 50 to 100, but we've got a number in there and it looks good. It gives it weight and credibility. Oh, and there's the number one employee. I got those a little bit out of order. And then here is the last one I wanted to share with you, because here's someone that you see was a special ed teacher here and here, but then they took several years off. And what happened here was that her mother was dying of cancer. And so she was prioritizing that in her life. And so we called it private residence home health care, and we just made it a bullet point in the resume to fill that gap and give some explanation. And again, I really counseled her to have a really emotionally neutral, canned answer when somebody asks her about that, because of course, this experience is going to be a super emotional one for her. So she needs a way to just say, yeah, I took that time off to care for my mother. And that's about all she's going to say about it.
So,
yes, go ahead.
I think that you've already talked about this a little bit just with that last example that you gave, but I've got a couple questions in the chat. One came up and said, how do we frame life experiences? She said, I didn't have a career break. I've never had a career, but I need to show that experience is worth something. I haven't had any side gigs or official volunteer work, despite keeping busy doing a lot of things for a lot of people. So that's, I mean, it's more nebulous. It's one thing to say I was the PTA president, I did these other things, but if our lives are full, as so many mothers' lives are full, are there different ways? And I think that one that you just shared is a very good example of caring for the mother. But what if you just have a lot of skills that you've gained through your life experience? Is there still a place for a skills section? And I didn't mean to circumvent another possible answer to that question. It was just an idea I had while we were talking. Yeah,
those are both a couple really good ideas. So this example, I feel like, is a good one for taking pretty just nebulous, all over the place volunteer experience and making it look resume-y, you know? Same with this one. This is just years of caretaking kind of described in bullet form. I do like, let me see if I can remember where I put stuff. This one. This is a PR executive, but we created this selected accomplishment section. And I can't remember why. It's probably because some of these items that we felt like were pretty important happened several years in the past. So they were going to get kind of buried in the resume, and we wanted to pull them forward. So this would be a possibility as well. Another possibility would be maybe a few sort of topical sections. So, you know, just brainstorming, one could be called graphic design, one could be called event management, and you have a few bullet points under each one. Here's the challenge with that. Throwing out a skill, and this relates to what we were saying a few minutes ago about dates. Throwing out a skill that's just floating in space makes it less credible. as much as possible, you want to connect it to an institution or a job or a time period, some way to show that it's really grounded rather than just sort of listing skills. So you can brainstorm what that might look like. If you're listing a school or an organization, maybe you were helping a friend with a city council campaign. You go ahead and list the city council name, finding some way to connect it to an organization, a time, a title, if you can.
I love that comment that you just made about brainstorming as well. And I know that you do this with your company. This is what you do with your company and with your writers. But even if we're not in a place right now where we can afford that kind of service or use that kind of service, brainstorming with a friend, brainstorming with somebody else to help us understand. I know that I've done this with some of our tech moms. Like, I've never done any work, and I start talking to them and I say, but what about this? Well, tell me what you do in your spare time. Well, how do you serve your kids? These other things like that. And we have come up with some great ideas. So I love that idea of brainstorming. It's a search into ourselves, right? To understand these different things. I've got one more quick question. When it comes to tech certificates, for example, JavaScript, HTML, full stack web developer, should that be implemented on a resume? And if so, is that something I provide a PDF to a certificate as a bullet point or as a list? I'm wondering if this will make the resume look cluttered. So do we do links in our resumes? Do we attach to other things, or what's the best way to list those types of certificates or demonstrations that we've accomplished a certain thing?
Yeah, I would definitely list the certificate. Let me find a more or less good example. Okay, so this one has a little tech training section and lists certificates. You don't have to document. You don't have to provide the PDF or the link. You can certainly do that if you want to, but you describe it, you share whatever organization that you got it from. So, if it's like Linda Online or, Project Management Institute or whatever that might be, that gives it some credibility. I would definitely list those. And I don't think I have an example on here, but I think it's a great idea to have a little section called Tech Stack or Tech Skills, and just list every single piece of software, tool, platform, CRM, list them all. Because for, this particular job, they might have their checklist of items that they're looking for. Or if they're not, it's just kind of establishing that credibility and breadth of experience. Okay, I think, we are about done with everything I wanted to share. I did want to share with you this because oh goodness, sorry. I blazed through so much so quickly, scrolling right here. I have an accomplishments generator tool that I want to share with you, where it kind of walks you through brainstorming everything that you've done, figuring out what the business outcome might be, turning that into a bullet point. So that is at redrocketresume.com/techmomresources. And there's actually a bunch of stuff on there. Robin and I kind of went through it together and figured out what information do I have that would be the most relevant to you, and kind of put it all together into this page for you. The Red Rocket Resume blog always has tons and tons of information. I probably need to hire one of you to fix it. Sometimes it's looking a little broken right now. I'm in progress on that. And I'm on all the social things at Red Rocket Resume, always posting information, and always love to hear, like Robin was saying, what are your biggest resume questions and headaches? I always love to hear about that and how your job search is going. So I hope you will keep in touch. Robin, do we have a few more questions in the meantime?
We do, and you did cruise through that. You're amazing. This is so much information, and I'm so grateful that I loved all the examples. So what I love, we do have a few more minutes, and we've got some more questions, but I would love just, and this is just kind of putting you on the spot, but going back to my question of religious service, right? And framing that appropriately into a professional context. 10 years ago, before I started doing all this work with career reentry, my sister told me that she wanted to create an app that was for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There are a lot of us here in Utah, that she would say, like, you could type into the app, Relief Society president, and it would pop out professional skills, job titles, all these other things. Like, you could just put in, primary chorister or whatever. And this is appropriate for the PTA. This is appropriate for, lots of different contexts. So for instance, if I had served, this is a service thing that I did at one point. I was an activities chairperson for my large congregation, and I threw events for 1,000 people. I did all these things. What's a concrete way that I can start framing some of those skills in a professional setting so that they sound relevant and appropriate on a resume?
Yeah, well, I love what you started doing just as you were describing it. Events for 1,000 people or more, 12 events per year, managed budgets of up to $500 per event. By putting numbers on it, you're giving it that credibility. So if you say, organize an activity for my church congregation, that doesn't sound impressive. But as soon as you start bringing in those numbers, then they're able to see, wow, this did take some leadership. And also making the mental pivot of describing it, kind of like you were saying with that app, which I think is hysterical, describing those tasks in business terms. So now the congregation is attendees. Now the services are events or activities. So yeah, kind of translating the jargon, translating the language, because it is very much relevant. Same thing with school and community service and so forth. So many of the things that we're doing. I want to look in, let's look at some more of these examples, because I think I had a couple with some church stuff on there.
I think the one you were just at a couple back.
So this was my sons who put church leader, as a teenager, held numerous leadership positions. I also have some where we include LDS missions, because those can be, a lot of really fantastic leadership experience. Okay. Look at this one. Under volunteer leadership, here we have missionary in Buenos Aires and Patagonia, full-time, self-funded volunteer missionary providing teaching and humanitarian service to diverse population, spoke exclusively Spanish, tapped for leadership positions to train new missionaries and lead large groups. So that's describing some religious service and sort of setting to the side the religious elements of that, and playing up the leadership, the organization, saying that it was full-time, self-funded, speaking Spanish. That really speaks to some, I guess I don't know how I would describe that, some competence, some communication and problem solving and so forth. Let me see. And this one also has missionary, full-time, self-funded. I must like that phrase. Teaching and humanitarian service. Okay, I used the same bullet point on 2 resumes. And then this one is just volunteer church, contribute time and leadership in various roles to support local church congregation. Now, if this was a resume for a teacher, which actually this one is, maybe you would say something like taught classes for children aged this to this, organized activities for children aged this to this many times per month. So yeah, those are all great questions though.
Okay, a couple more things have come up. This is wonderful. And I love that you're showing the different ways that we can keep it very general if we don't have a lot of space, or if the experience is very relevant, we can really dive in there more in a more detailed way. So someone had mentioned that they had always heard that a 2-page resume was a no-no, and you're showing that that's not the case. Do you want to talk about that just in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, that is definitely a big misperception. If you are an established professional, you are almost always going to need that second page. Brevity is a virtue on your resume. You want to cover as much ground as you can. You don't want to have lots of fluff because, again, you are trying to give service to this HR person who's just trying to get the job done and find the right information. So we're not going to go blah, blah, blah too much. But if you are leaving off relevant information in order to be brief, then you have lost whatever you would have gained from being brief. So again, you're going to use that magic yardstick. If it's relevant, if it's moving the dial, if it's explaining why you can deliver what you're looking for, then you want to go ahead and include it on the resume, which for most people is going to mean going to a second page. So almost all established professionals have 2 pages.
So a lot of us, if we're just getting started, we haven't had, tons of work experience, we're going to be okay with that 1 pager. But even after a couple of jobs or 2, 5 years down the line, for even those of us who are just starting from scratch, that 2-page resume is going to be very appropriate.
Right. And the other thing that's going to happen is you're going to rearrange the order. Before too long, after you've got 1 or 2 jobs, that education is going to go back down to the bottom because the most relevant information is going to become that job. And some of this information is going to fall right off the bottom. So the missionary, the volunteer, the sales associate, those are not going to last long on this resume. Once she's gotten a couple jobs, we're going to leave those off because they're no longer as relevant.
I love it. And that leads to another question that someone just asked in the chat. And we might have already addressed this, but why would you list specific church experiences rather than just volunteer? Why would we keep it more specific rather than just simple? And I think we've talked about that if the experience is relevant to the job we're looking for, that's the time to get more specific. Otherwise, we just want to say, I've given good service. I've been active in my community. I've been like a generally productive citizen. We're like that.
Right, right. And you also want to take that and you want to give it some real credibility. So the person picking up your resume, they're not sure if they believe you. They're not sure if you are worth them taking a risk on. So you are persuading them by giving them this evidence. So if you say something like, I'm a really with it person and I really serve a lot in my community, that's not as compelling as it is if you can give some of those specifics.
Got it. All right, a couple more questions here. One is my references. Well, this is a concern. My references are so old. What do we do about that?
They may not call your references. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So you should have, let's say, 3 references. They should be people who are going to be enthusiastic about endorsing you. It's okay if they're a little bit older. In that case, you are definitely not going to want to skip the step of letting them know that you have listed them as a reference and maybe reminding them of some of the things that you did for them. So maybe it's a job that ended 10 years ago, but you did some really good work at that job and your boss loved you. So you reach out to the boss, you say, I am rebooting my career. I'm doing XYZ. I would love to list you as a reference. Can I just send you a quick email summarizing some of the projects that we worked on together? So now their memory is fresh. And when they get called, even though it's a little bit older, they can be enthusiastic in endorsing you. I got a call just last week from somebody who had not let me know that she was listing me as a reference. And I was kind of having to scramble in response to some of the questions. So definitely would have been helpful to have had a heads up. So the question was, can you list a reference if it's older? And was there anything else in the question?
Well, I also want to ask, if you don't have great bosses or coworkers to list as references, who are some other options?
Yeah, so it is definitely best to have your references be bosses, coworkers, direct reports. If that's not really applicable to you, a teacher or a mentor is fantastic. It could definitely be someone that you worked with in one of those volunteer capacities. Let's see, I'm looking at this. Your supervisor at the internship would be great. Mission president would be great. Maybe a Relief Society president that you worked under would be great. And again, I would list those people sort of translating their jargon. So, organization leader or something like that, as opposed to Relief Society president.
Right. Okay, one last question here, and then we'll let you go. I know we're bucking up against our time. So I'm currently working on a master's in business administration and management. Do most recruiters assume they have the tech training, so therefore mentioning any tech training will be irrelevant? And more broadly, are there times when something is so obvious that you're going to have, you don't need to list the training or skills, or should we always list it?
I mean, I wouldn't always list, say, Microsoft Word. I would say that one's pretty obvious. We're going to hope that you can do Microsoft Word. But I would not assume that they know a lot about what's included in that program. I would list the tech skills. And one way of approaching that is by looking at the job description. Does the job description list, HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever? If the job description lists it, you want it in your resume for those ATS screener systems that I mentioned, and also for the human readers. My guess is that you've got space on your resume to have a line listing some of those tech skills. If that's a focus of your resume, if that's the direction where your career is going, then that seems very relevant and should be included. So I would say the bar is really pretty low on stuff they're assuming that you know how to do. Don't put typing, don't put Microsoft Word. But other than that, if it's relevant to the job post, then I would outline it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, we are out of time tonight. This has been absolutely fabulous. I am so grateful that you were willing to take your amazing expertise and your time to come talk to us tonight. You've given us so many incredible samples to look at and things that we can use as models. And you've opened up this portal for us, which is wonderful. I put it out on our Slack channel the other day. I'm like, we've got this Red Rocket resume portal. And someone just wrote back in and they're like, this is amazing. So thank you so much. You've been such a generous partner to us. We're really grateful. As I mentioned, so, some of our tech moms are kind of new, budgets really tight and different things like that. But for those who have a little more resources and things like that, can you tell us just quickly about your services and the different ways that we can access what you've got to offer?
Yeah, and I just love what Tech Moms does so much. I'm such a huge believer in just the untapped potential of women and bringing women into the limelight and letting the world benefit from all of those skills. So I just love what you're doing, and I'm just completely a fangirl of all of it. So yes, I would love to work with anyone. If you're just really struggling and not sure how to put this all together, a big part of what we do, I match you up with a writer from my team, and you have a phone call with your writer, and that's where you brainstorm. And the writer says, oh, wait, tell me about blah, blah, blah. How many people do you think were attending that event? Did you do anything in regards to planning? Were you in charge of managing the money or the purchasing? And helping you kind of brainstorm all of that. It's hard to do for yourself, like you were saying, Robin. And it's hard to kind of hit the right level of tooting your horn and how much detail. So we love to help and step in with that. So then we create a draft for you. We send it to you. We let you take a look, let us know. Sometimes when you see that first draft, it gives you some more ideas, and we continue working with you on those revisions until you're happy with it. We do LinkedIn profiles. We're connected with some career coaching from Britt Larson, who you heard from last week. We have some other resources that I won't get into right now. But yeah, we would love to hear from any of you. Reach out at any time. And if you have any questions, let me know, and I hope to hear from you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. I just saw a note in the chat saying that they thought it was rescheduled because we started a couple of minutes late and missed it. Don't worry, we'll have this available for you to watch. So so you'll be able to see everything that we've talked about tonight. Again, Angela, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, next week, just one final word. We are going to be hearing from a VP of Technical Services at Pure Storage, Laura McCarty, pardon me. She's a big executive at a huge company, and she started in tech support with no background in tech at all. And she's going to talk to us about her jungle gym of a career and how she moved up and moved forward in tech. So it's going to be a wonderful presentation next week. We'd love to have you join us. Again, thanks to Angela, and everybody have a fantastic night. We will catch you later. Bye-bye. I think it might still be recording, so I'll just say good night to you. Thank you so much. All right, catch you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.